Welcome Andrew Davis to Wimauma Mamas.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What made you so interested in traffic, Andrew?
Well, I think like many of us, just being a resident in this area and sitting in traffic and seeing that you're now taking half an hour for what should be a 10-minute drive, it gets frustrating. You know, at one point I kind of sat around and said, wait, what's causing this? And I looked into it more and more and found out basically that it was just local politicians selling us out to their donators at that point, and it's a real shame what's going on.
You say that the local politicians are selling us out. How does that happen?
One of the biggest ways that a town or a county goes ahead and builds up an infrastructure, meaning the roads, the schools, the fire departments, the sheriff's offices, things that a developing area really needs as they grow, is through what they call impact fees. Now, those are fees that are paid for by developers every house they built at that point, so that way they can go ahead and build these things that our infrastructure needs. So those fees in our area are just percentages of what other areas around here charge. Manatee County, just to the south of us, actually charges about twice as much as we charge for those impact fees. So when we look around and see roads not being widened, which in most part of the county here is like a curse word practically saying that, but in this area we really need that. We don't see the fire departments growing, which is a huge issue in this area. If there's ever a massive fire down here in the South Shore area, we are in big trouble. And most people do not realize that we are way short on fire department stations around here. We are short on trucks as well, and I hope it never happens, but I really think, unfortunately, it's probably going to take a big fire for people to realize that. But these things are all paid for by impact fees. So we allow these developers to get away with these huge discounts at that point. This is why we're in the problem we're in. But these developers are the same ones that are giving to these people that are running for office, because it's cheaper for them to go out and give $1,000 donations and have all their friends give $1,000 donations than it is to pay them millions and millions of dollars that they're saving on discounts on the impact fees.
Wow, that's a huge amount.
How does the transportation referendum factor into all of this? And for those who don't know, what is the transportation referendum?
Yeah, so all of the residents of this county, this November we had the opportunity to vote for or against a 1 cent sales tax increase that is specifically targeted towards helping transportation needs, whether it be mass transit, roads, new projects in general at that point. And we voted overwhelmingly for it. And I think it's because most people are tired of being stuck in traffic. But it's a real shame that we're now paying the bill that should have been paid for by developers years ago. But as I said before, these local politicians have sold us out now, and we're now stuck with this bill that could have been paid years ago. And it's a real shame that we can't even trust our own politicians to do what's in our best interest. So much to the fact that now it's an independent committee that's looking at how to spend these funds because we don't trust the people that we voted into office. So the real question is, why are we voting these people in? If we can't trust them with money, then are they really the right people for the job? I really think we need to take a hard look as a county and say, why are we voting for these people when they're not in our best interest overall? So it's a real shame, but I'm glad it passed because I really think there's going to be some new things in all throughout the county, including East Hillsborough here, which obviously for those who are deep into local politics know there's actually a lawsuit going on against it by our county commissioner, Stacy White, who was my opponent in the November election, because frankly, he doesn't want the people's voice spoken for anymore, and he wants to be the one to decide everything, which is a real shame at that point. We voted for it. He's supposed to be our voice. We had our voice. It's the voice is spoken. So I really, if he's listening, I'd call on him, drop the lawsuit, let it go forward, and let us go ahead and get the development done right in this area for once, instead of keep on building and building and building without a plan, which is what we've been doing. It doesn't work.
Yeah, Andrew, in this podcast, we're trying to reach people like me, the common idle citizen who's not really involved, and I should be a lot more, and that's why I've stepped forward. In the world of persuasion, talking to each individual in our community, what do you want us to do?
Well,
how do we enact?
I'm a little bit brash, I'll tell you that up front. So let me tell you this. Every time you sit in traffic and you haven't been involved and you haven't been angry, think about that for a minute. Because to be honest, it's all of our faults this happened. Because if we had made these elected officials more accountable years ago, we wouldn't be in this boat. So I encourage everybody, as you're sitting in traffic, because we're all sitting on 301, 75, all these roads at that point, sitting in this massive amount of traffic because there's only a few main roads, just say, this is our fault, because it is. We have not held them accountable at that point. Politicians are like children. Every so often, they got to be scolded.
Excellent, excellent. I like that very much. How would you fix the problem? Do you have ideas or anything that?
The biggest thing really is to go ahead and up those impact fees. That's the biggest thing that we can do. And, we have obviously some fresh blood here now in the county commission. So, I'm glad to see that, my friends Mary Ella Smith and Kimberly Oberman both have now won seats there on the county commission. I'd encourage them, along with Pat Kemp, who obviously has been, a huge vocal person on this topic as well, to go ahead and up the impact fees. And I'm not saying go for blood with these developers at that point. They're a business, they deserve to make money at that point, but have them pay their fair share. If they pay their fair share, we have the money to do a lot of the projects we need to get done. So, I encourage them to kind of get this moving forward so we can get these impact fees where they should be at that point and should have been long ago.
Sometimes I think the South Shore has been forgotten, or they just think we're a little town. But South Shore area, the Ruskin, Wimauma, the whole area, is really growing, and we need more answers to the traffic. Is there any other, some sort of special bus service or something that you would suggest?
The biggest issue really is encouraging people to use mass transit in this area. And that's one of the things I don't hear about often from either side of the arguments on these. We had buses around here much more than we do now. They weren't being used. The biggest issue I had with that was, first off, obviously we have nearby Sun City, which has, I think there's one bus that leaves King Point, was it twice a week or something like that?
Yeah.
That point, I think that's about right. It's a shame that you have an area that now is, primarily senior with no transit options. So, you're giving people the ability, basically forcing them to stay at their home, or you're having people that literally shouldn't be driving, that are now on the roads driving because they have no other option.
Good point.
But the issue that you really run into is that we need to look at why were these mass transit options not being used? Did people not know about them? Were the routes not convenient? Were the times not convenient? Or maybe we go, what? We just shouldn't have a bus here. Maybe we need to have a commuter van here instead, or something along those lines at that point, which would be a lot less expensive to run. But, we really need to look at options as a whole, and rail would be a great option. But the big issue is if you're going to spend that kind of money, you have to know people are going to use it. I think one thing that I'd love to see, I know they're talking about the ferry, obviously, from the South Shore area over to South Tampa. We have to figure out a way to get people over from here to there without going all the way around, because that would alleviate so much of the traffic issues. But again, there's a lot of logistics issues. Obviously going over from here to there, you're now crossing where is the port. So you have massive ships going through all the time at that point. I think really the best fix in my eyes, and we'd have to do studies on it obviously, would be to go ahead and get the federal government involved to get a bridge. I think that really is the best solution at that point, to get people from here to there without having to go an hour around at that point. It just makes no sense. The quickest point to any place is a straight line.
Yes, it is.
So, but would have to be a drawbridge. We'd have to look at the logistics and how high would it have to be to allow most of the ships to get underneath without having to lift that drawbridge every 5 minutes, because then we'll hit that traffic too. But there's solutions out there. It's a matter of thinking outside the box at that point.
No, I never thought about building another bridge. That's a wonderful idea. And it would be used much more than the ferry, which only can take so many cars or people at one time.
And typically isn't very cheap.
Yes.
The average person could not afford to take a ferry back and forth to work all the time. I know they were talking about having it near the base, and most people in the military obviously are unfortunately underpaid, which is amazing considering how much this government pays on military spending. But that's a topic for another day. But they're not being able to afford to spend $30 a day to get back and forth to work. They're not going to have that in their budget at that point. Who has $150 a week just to travel back and forth to work?
Where I come from, Los Angeles, California, and I worked for the federal government, but most employers did this as well. I'm sorry, I worked for the state government, but most employers did this as well, and that is they gave me a check every month, and I would spend it, so I would get $267, something like that, toward my travel on light rail or bus. Those are the two ways in LA. Could you see that happening here? I mean, you'd have to get all the employers to.
I could see it happening with some companies. The problem is Florida has basically advertised itself as the come here and pay people as little as possible state. So when you have that mentality, you don't have the businesses that want to go ahead and pay people that kind of money. Look at the big Amazon building that a lot of local politicians tout as bringing jobs here. Most of those people are making under $15 an hour.
Oh.
There's a lot of people there that are making more. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of executives there and stuff that are making a lot of money. But the average person that's sitting there moving boxes around, they're not making that much money. So they talk about the average. They don't talk about what percentage are making under $15 an hour there. And that's a pretty large percentage. So, when we have somebody who's willing to pay people what is essentially not a living wage, I don't expect them to go ahead and be willing to also now give money towards transportation, unfortunately. That's why we need to go ahead and support the local businesses, because there's a lot of local business owners out here that probably would. But when you get these huge corporations out here, I can't see them doing that.
Tampa Bay Times ran a story on how we have one of the worst mass transit systems in the country. I think back in '95, we were ranked 28th, and Phoenix was ranked 24th. And because Phoenix had ended up investing in a light rail system, they've improved their standing to 18th in the nation. Do you see something like that happening here?
No. Unfortunately, I'd love to have a different answer for you, but here's part of the problem. I mean, they were talking about at one point combining the MPOs and having one big Tampa Bay Area MPO. That I was very against.
NPO is what?
Basically, that's the metropolitan planning at that point. So basically, they're planning all of the different transit options for that particular area. That I do not like. What I do like is the idea of having one big mass transit system that's now all the different counties and cities are all involved with. How great would it be to be able to be down in Sarasota and take a train or take a bus and go all the way up to Clearwater at that point?
Yes, or Tallahassee.
Being a Jersey boy myself at that point, I would say, without the massive tolls, obviously, I would look at something like what they do in the Port Authority. Everything is shared amongst New York and New Jersey for getting back and forth between the two at that point. And because of that, they were able to get a lot of projects up and running a lot quicker. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to have a $20 toll on a bridge at that point, like I said, but it's a great idea to get, Clearwater, St. Pete, Pinellas County itself, Tampa, Hillsborough County, even Manatee County and Bradenton, Sarasota, and I would go that far. Go from Sarasota all the way up to Clearwater at that point.
Beautiful.
And you would have the ability at that point to go to any of those locations using one transit system. It's not that far, but it's a huge, population of people for what the state has at that point. It would help a lot of people. So I don't know why, somebody hasn't basically spoke up that has the position to do so and said, put your egos aside, everybody already, because that's what it boils down to. There was a couple of years ago, I want to say it was one of the county commissioners in Pinellas had said they were having discussions with someone in Hillsborough about it. And immediately that person shot them down. No, we are not discussing this at all. I don't know where they're coming from. Regardless if the conversations happen or not, take that as a chance to extend an olive branch and say, you know what? Let's continue these talks. Who cares if they didn't start? Take that as an opportunity. Continue those talks. Get everything going. Because who's being hurt by this is us. We're being forced to go into our cars at that point and sit in traffic.
Which is a waste of time.
And horrible for the environment.
Just one more thing, you talk about buses. There are no buses in Wimauma itself. The people who live in Wimauma have zero bus service. Not one bus drives through it. What do you think about that?
Well, I think any area that has an influx of people needs to look at, having mass transit options. And Wimauma is very new, obviously, to having the influx that they've had, same as Ruskin and other areas down here as well. So I think we need to look at it now while the population is growing and not wait till it actually has grown and say, oh, there's a lot of people here now. What should we do? You should be planning this as the population is growing. And it's a real shame that we think about these things after the fact instead of going ahead of time. Because like you mentioned, rail.
Yes.
You wait longer, we're not going to have a spot to put the rail down.
Yes.
Because there's going to be a new development wherever you would want to put it.
Absolutely.
So, you have to plan these things ahead of time at that point, and it's a real shame that we haven't.
The other thing I was going to say is I used to take the bus when I was living in Brandon to USF. And so that in itself is like maybe like a 2-hour trek because you would have to take like maybe 2-3 buses to get to where you wanted to be. And there's not really a lot of good options for direct routes. When I moved here, I was looking up the time it would take to take a bus, and it was like telling me something like 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, luckily now I'm lucky enough to say that I have a car, but not everybody is so lucky. So what would you say about that issue?
Well, you picked a very good example as far as location-wise, because if you go up to the university area, there's a lot of high-paying jobs there. It's an extremely low-income living area, though. So what does that tell you? That tells you that people working there are not the people living there at that point. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the biggest spots we need to look at how to alleviate traffic, really, because people are traveling from South Tampa and South Shore and everything, and that's where they're going to work. That's where they're going to school at that point. I think the only solution that I could see, because of just the massive development we had in those areas, would be to put either whether you want to do a bus route or a train route right alongside 75 mm-hmm. and put it there. But again, you now have to incorporate the federal government. That's a federal road. They're going to want their hand in that pot and figure out where things are going. But it's the only logical place that I can think of to put it, because you're going through areas that, quite frankly, are so broken there's no fixing. Places like Bloomingdale, which is where I work off of at that point, where I literally see accidents on a daily basis, it seems like. Mm-hmm. But there's just no way of fixing those roads at that point. So there's no spot to put a bus. And you're going to put more vehicles at that point now onto an area that's already overcrowded. So, it's a shame, but I hate to say an area is it's gone. That's what that area is.
Yeah, and they're thinking of adding more apartments somewhere on Bloomingdale, mm-hmm. Which sounds insane because I've driven Bloomingdale, especially like at 4 or 5 o'clock, and you're just sitting there.
Yeah, and they allow people just to turn wherever they want, still on that road and everything, and that's most of the accidents you see. If you look at right when you get off of 301 there, you got the Home Depot on the one side, you got Target on the other. There's a straight way to go right across from either side. Now, it's probably not legal, but it's straight there. People are going to do it.
Yeah.
We need to look at areas like that and say, okay, this has had, an accident a week. Let's put a barrier here. Mm-hmm. Stop people from doing this at that point. But, like I said, those areas, unfortunately, they try to come up with solutions, and I give people the credit. We're still fighting and trying to figure out a way to do it, but you keep on building. You put in small roads. It's not a good combination, and that's what we're staring at down here. And unfortunately, I see that as our future down here. And it's a real shame, they keep on building developments and wherever they want. Obviously the road we're on right now, we're on 19 here. This is a classic example. You have just homes being built everywhere, and it's just, the time it takes people from here to get to 75 is just utterly ridiculous. It's probably half their commute just to get on the interstate.
Right. So, when you get to 19 and 301, the people on 19 are backed up. I don't know how far down, but they're backed up pretty far down. And they have to wait for that light to change mm-hmm. in order to make a left-hand turn.
Yeah, I live off of Bullfrog Creek. I deal with the same thing there. That's a very small road, and it only has a couple developments on it. Mm. But I deal with that some mornings where I'll be sitting there 10, 15 minutes just to get from Bullfrog Creek over onto Sims, 2 side streets. But it's because we've allowed them to develop on these areas at that point and didn't build the infrastructure to go along with it.
Wow, you've given us a lot to think.
Andrew, the priorities of not just Hillsborough County, but the state, it just seems to me, and I'm an outsider, not from Florida, moving in, it seems as though if the state government sets the palette, it doesn't reach the counties. It seems that the leadership is such that we're not, going to move forward in whatever terminology of progressive or not. We're going to stay idle. We're going to maintain the course, but it doesn't show progress. How do we extend ourselves to reach beyond Hillsborough County to point here at Wimauma?
Unfortunately, the problem you run into with that is the state government, quite frankly, will sit there and take the hands-off approach with most things local. Because they'll say, we don't want this big government mentality. Of course, that's until they disagree with something we want to do locally, but that's a whole different issue. But the issue is at that point, they'll say, let the local area deal with the local area. But if the local area is not dealing with the local area, they don't want to step in. They don't want that appearance of big government. They just don't. Except for when it comes to things like legalization of marijuana and issues with gun laws. But like I said, that's their mentality at that point. So we really have to just push the local officials, you know. And I think that's the big thing is find the people that you know are willing to push and push them to push harder. Because you got some people out there like Ken Hagan, who's, you know, taking hundreds of thousands of dollars every time he runs from these developers. He's not going to go against them. To be honest, I hate to say this ever, but even calling his office is a waste of your time and breath. You're better off talking to someone at that point and pushing them, and, you know, like someone like a Pat Kemp and saying, hey, listen, I know you've been talking about issues going on down here. Thank you for thinking of us. I encourage you to push harder. She keeps getting those calls. She's going to keep on pushing harder because she knows it's going through. And quite frankly, she's up for re-election herself soon at that point. So she's making people happy. She's going to keep on doing it. That's the name of the game. You know, keep on pushing those people, and you know, also, you know, talk to people that are your state representatives at that point and tell them, hey, listen, I know this is not usual, but let's try to get some help down here, because some of these areas are state roads. You know, so those state roads are the one thing that we can push them on helping at that point. You know, and make sure they're aware of things. You know, whether it be, you know, up in Brandon talking to Adam Hattersley, or you know, I don't know, our local state rep actually. I always say talk to Adam.
Oh my goodness, I can't think. You know what we're going to have to do? We're going to put all the representatives on for this area on our Facebook page.
And Twitter and Instagram.
And Twitter and Instagram. And so that way,
all the social media accounts.
That's right. And that way you can look up who represents you, and you can call them and do what. So we should contact the state legislators, and we should contact our county commissioners.
Contact the state ones as far as when it goes to issues involving state roads. I say the one thing always is when you're talking to an elected official, make sure you're staying within their lane. You know, if you're talking to a state rep about issues about impact fees here locally, they're like, well, what do you want me to do about it? Like, they can't do anything about that. That's not their lane. So, you know, talk to them as far as when it comes to the issues with the state roads at that point. Talk to the local people about side streets, about issues involving transportation options here, about issues with impact fees, about not having the fire departments. As you can tell, my list is a lot longer for people that are local. You know, you can also, you know, I would encourage you also to talk to, Vern Buchanan as well about the issues involving 75.
That's Congressman Vern Buchanan.
Yeah, we need to be, more proactive in pushing him to say, listen, we need some more exits here. I understand that the issue is that we need to be a mile in between exits at a minimum at that point, but there's got to be some kind of creative loophole that we can figure out to make a ramp or something for those areas that are 0.9, like 19th. 19th is 0.9 of a mile at that point, so you're 1/10 of a mile away from being able to put an exit here. That's what stopped it.
Oh,
So
that's
they found
ridiculous.
So there's got to be either a loophole or a way that we can get an exemption for these things at that point. But that only comes from people just basically calling him nonstop about these issues, and to the point where he says, I have to do this because if not, when I go to run again for re-election, this is gonna haunt me. Because unfortunately, that's what gets these people motivated, is staying in office. So it's not really doing the right thing, unfortunately, for a lot of them. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. I'm kind of a cynic, if you can tell. But it's the truth. So, you know, we need to hold them to the fire and say, this is an important issue to us. And if you don't handle this, when it comes down to re-election, I'll make it my goal to get you out and get somebody who will do something about this.
That sounds fabulous. I want to thank you. This has been a terrific session. I've just learned so much. I can't believe how much I've learned, and I hope our public listening will respond and make those phone calls, because it works.
Yes, please. And I always tell people, if you're going to call someone in their DC office for someone like Congressman Vern Buchanan, don't hesitate at that point to get a Google Voice number because you can actually change it to be a local DC number.
Oh, wow.
So if you're worried that they're not going to pick up somebody local at that point because they're dealing with this issue too much, feel free to get a Google Voice number for DC. You can talk to all the congressmen at that point, and they'll have no clue at that point that you're somebody from down here calling. It's a great way to get around that issue.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
Well, we want to thank you for coming and spending your time with us, and we really appreciate
No,
it.
thanks for having me. I wish you was a blast.